Now I'm going to have to flip the video or else my t-shirt's not going to look not going to read. Ha! There I am. There's the camera up there. So sometimes you read the important stuff. Sometimes you read the trash. And lately I've been reading The Radio Boys Seek the Lost Atlantis. It's published in 1926. And when you think about the state of radio in 1926, it had barely begun, but it was exciting and new, and only the kids understood it. Well, so we have a boy's adventure story, which is essentially, you should be thinking of something like the Hardy Boys. The Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, those were the famous ones, but there were so many of these. I have here the Radio Boys, have another Radio Boys. I also have the Motor Boys, because they're like into cars, and that was another totally new, totally exciting technology in the 1920s. So, we have a story in which Bob, Jack, and Frank, under the leadership or guardianship of Mr. Hampton, go off in search of the lost Atlantis. And it turns out that Atlantis was exactly where Plato said it was, out past the Pillars of Hercules. It did sink beneath the sea, but being a seafaring people, most of the citizens escaped. And they decamped to North Africa. They crossed the desert and built a new civilization in the mountains that had never been discovered. But a professor, Professor Suchard, had discovered the lost city of the Atlanteans called Athinzi, so they are now the Athinzians, and had contacted Mr. Hampton, asking him if he would like to mount an expedition to reveal the secrets of Athinzi. Mr. Hampton and the boys set off for North Africa, where they are crossing the desert with their Arab, Bedouin guides. Now, you might be thinking that a story set in Africa from 100 years ago, a story that involves a lot of Arab characters would probably have a lot of things that today are kind of racially uncomfortable. And the truth is, very little of that, actually. Very little. After the publication of T.E. Lawrence, after the role that the Arabs played in World War One, they were viewed fairly positively by the English-speaking public. This is long before the establishment of Israel and long before all of the sort of terrorist notions that get associated with Islam today. So they were thought of as, foreign, obviously, but very brave and very, very strong and very much the sort of people that could be relied upon. Likewise, maybe because it's set in North Africa, not deeper into Africa, racial attitudes don't play a huge role. And I actually only found one passage that kind of made me wince. Maybe my sensitivities aren't on hair trigger, but there was one point where you see the Athenians have sacrificial games. So, think Hunger Games 100 years ago. They pit Athenians against people, captives that they have captured or have bought in the slave markets in Africa. And in one passage, they find out that they have occasionally bought white slaves, which the characters are all shocked by, and you kind of go, oh, God. I don't want to try to justify it or wave it away. But considering its era, there's very little of this objectionable material. It might not be the case in the sequel to the Radio Boys. In Atlantis, which I have here, the Radio Boys in Darkest Africa. Haven't read it yet. I'm not sure. That may not be my next one. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, good story. Basic boys' adventure. One of the boys goes on an ostrich hunt. Do they have ostriches in North Africa? I would have thought that was more southern, but, well, let's give them that. So they go on an ostrich hunt. One of the boys is captured by the Athenians for their sacrificial games, and the others have to go and rescue him. They're met by an airplane pilot. Airplanes being yet another new technology in the 1920s that was very young and fresh and exciting. The boys and Mr. Hampton and Roy Stone with his airplane, the Arabs that are in their party, and also disaffected people from the culture of the Atlanteans, combine to attack and overthrow the city of Athens, free their friend who's been captured, and open the sacred, forgotten, hidden city of Athens, which was the seed culture that had spread and become ancient Egypt and ancient Babylon and ancient Greece and all of the ancient world. As a boy's adventure story, it is what it is. As a product of its time, it is what it is. And it's a little bit better than you expect. The chapters are super short. They tend to be 3, 5, 7 pages. So you can read one at a sitting and move on. It's very easy. It's meant to be very easy because it's meant to be for boys. So that is The Radio Boys Seek the Lost Atlantis. Now, this book, published in 1926, I don't know, can you see that? Starting to fall apart, starting on the front side, and actually falling apart on the back side. So, I think what I'm going to do is another video that shows how to take an old book like this that is falling apart and repair its binding so that this book, now about 90 years old, ought to be good for another 90 years or so, and maybe somebody else will read and laugh at it. That's my video.